Welcome everyone. May is Sexual Assault Prevention Month, and we want you to know that no one asks for it. It's Friday, and you still need consent. Welcome everyone. If you are wanting to learn more about our center, you can head on over to our various social media pages. There is where we've got fundraisers and giveaways going on, as well as lots of information surrounding sexual violence. The conversation today is going to be about the intersections of sexual violence and newcomers. And so for this conversation, we have got the interim executive director of the Kawartha Sexual Assault Center, Reem Ali, here. Hello, how are you?
Hi, Alicia. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here with you today.
Amazing. Okay, so you have some previous experience working with newcomers. Can you talk about what that role was like and what it was like being a newcomer in Peterborough, of all places?
Yeah, yes, in my previous job, I worked primarily with newcomer women on women's economic empowerment projects. So a lot of work on building skills, technical skills, as well as language skills, to support them in finding employment opportunities that perhaps may not fall within what is perceived as traditional pathways to employment.
Mm,
And that's because, recognizing their different experiences, recognizing the different conditions that they have to take into consideration when making those choices, it was important to make sure that they have different choices that are available to them.
mhm.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, in terms of being a newcomer in Peterborough, when I was first a newcomer 25 years ago, it was a very different experience than being a newcomer now in Peterborough. The city has changed and developed and evolved over the last 25 years. It continues to be home for myself and my family. Um, yes, it was difficult, and I'll admit it still continues to be difficult on some days, but it's a work in progress, and it does require recognition from everyone that it is a in progress, and that if we want it to be a welcoming city that is inviting others to, come and make Peterborough home, then there's a lot for us to do collectively to ensure that that is indeed the case.
Hmm. And with May being Sexual Assault Prevention Month and these intersections of sexual violence, we see numbers like 1 in 3 women and 1 in 8 men. But when we start to break down these different intersections, there are populations of people that experience sexual violence at much higher rates, whether that be sexual violence, domestic violence, gender-based violence. Could you maybe elaborate on that and talk about maybe what are some of the differences for folks that are experiencing this, especially as a
Yeah,
newcomer?
yeah, of course. So for newcomers, of course, there's multiple factors that may further perpetuate existing sexual violence that they may be going through, or historical trauma that they arrive with. And with both, it's a little difficult to navigate. Newcomers often arrive, kind of their greatest priority, their greatest concerns are about getting settled immediately. And if they have children, then it's about getting the children enrolled in schools and receiving their orientation package about what they need to know, and where do they go for to shop for essentials, finding stable housing, etc. So oftentimes during this time, it's a bit of a crisis time, in the sense that there's a lot of priorities that they would like to have taken care of before they start thinking about some of these other issues, some of these other underlying issues. And we've certainly seen examples where, once the dust has settled, some women in particular have come forward to, disclose some issues that were ongoing for them. Disclosures is tough for newcomers because, there are a lot of barriers. There may be some cultural barriers, although it's well documented that settlement agencies are sort of the go-to place for this kind of disclosure, because of the good rapport and trust building that happens during the resettlement process. And so oftentimes it's not just something related to sexual assault or sexual violence that may be disclosed, but it could be any sorts of things, any issues that they might have. This is their first go-to place. And so I think, one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that because these are locations where newcomers are most likely to disclose, these would be good places for us and other partner organizations to connect to, because referrals can happen in that way. But other things that may be happening are some cultural barriers perhaps to disclosing sexual assault. The stigma that is associated with that. It's such a taboo issue. For newcomer women in particular, disclosing something like that doesn't just risk losing her home in the sense that she might be losing her husband or her kids, or losing the actual physical place where she is housed. But it could be also a loss in the general sense of a home, meaning a community. So oftentimes newcomers who arrive, they associate with, existing communities that are, from the same place, the same background, the same culture, etc. And when you disclose, you're also risking, what those folks might start thinking of you, and how they might perceive what you did. Is it wrong? Is it right? Is it risky, etc. And so there's really a lot to think about, a lot to risk essentially when you're coming forward to disclose. It's not such an easy thing to do. And we know from our experience at KSAC that it's not an easy thing to do for anyone really. So when you add those added layers, that's where the intersectionality comes in, right? Of all of these other sort of oppressive hierarchies that we're talking about. When you have race and gender and class and history and culture, all of these things intersecting together, then it just adds more and more layers to the difficulty around that. And I can say that I think in terms of status, that did change not too long ago, though, where a lot of women in the past may not have come forward because as per the law, she has to stay with her partner for a minimum 2 years in order for that status application to move forward. And that is no longer the case, thankfully. So, newcomers who arrive, they can disclose something like that as soon as they arrive and separate from their partners or their abusers, etc., if need be. And that's really a relief to know that at least they know that they have the security of doing so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and exactly what you said around just the increased barriers for a variety of reasons for newcomers is very difficult when you're in a new place. And you can even think about moving to different communities and who are the people that you talk to, right? And so it makes sense that survivors or people who are experiencing this form of violence or abuse go back to what they know, and that is that settlement agency, right? And so that it's so important to recognize that there are these added intersections for folks who are experiencing this form of violence as newcomers, and that there's a prioritization almost in like going to school or getting your children enrolled in school may be more important as a mother than your own health, right, and well-being, because you got to get your kids to school or else you face added barriers and added issues.
Absolutely. And it's not until you're fully immersed that you really begin to understand the space that you're in, the community that you're in, to also know what resources are available to you. And that again is something that settlement agencies are very good at doing, is recognizing and connecting with the community, the other community partners that exist, and making those quick referrals. But as a newcomer, you don't really know what's available to you. So I come forward and I talk about this. Are there counseling services that are available to me? Are there shelters that are available to me? it's tough for them to know that, right? And anyone who comes forward to disclose their trauma, surely is thinking about all of those things. And it's one of the reasons why we try to spread awareness about our own services so that people know what resources are available to them.
Hmm. Yeah, and I feel like there's also the language barrier, right? Like what one country may refer to as a shelter, another country may refer to as a second home, or I don't know, or like different
Yeah,
language surrounding that. So even
yeah,
like
yeah.
Googling could be irrelevant because you're using the wrong verbiage in different countries, right?
Sure, sure. Language is huge. It's a huge barrier. We often talk about sort of the social, economic integration aspects to language, but there's, it really percolates into every aspect of your life. And when we talk about counseling services in particular, the language that we use because of the training that folks receive here, is very English based, right?
Mhm.
And so even if you want to use this language with a newcomer, you're looking at having interpretation services that can accommodate those kind of technical terms that you're trying to use during your counseling session. So it's really complicated, and particularly in the context of a small city like Peterborough. Perhaps in the GTA, you can access counseling services in different languages. And even though I know they're scarce, but more so here in Peterborough. And so, and all of that to say is that if we are approached by someone who does need that kind of support, we'll find the resources to make it work. But it is certainly challenging. And I think it does raise the question for those who want to share those experiences, whether they will be receiving the culturally appropriate service for them.
Mhm. And so, Reem, if there's a newcomer out there who is experiencing maybe something not so good in the home, what message do you have for them watching this video right now?
Yeah, I would say, it doesn't matter who you choose to disclose to, but do come forward and share your story. That person who you're sharing your story with might actually be able to support you. If it is your settlement worker, that's great. Your settlement worker will keep things confidential and will reach out to the right resources out there. And likewise, any other service provider is bound by confidentiality. So um, they have your best interest at heart, and they will want to support you. So they will reach out to the right services, and they will ensure your safety and security.
And so, one more message: if there's anyone out there who is supporting someone who is a newcomer who may be experiencing something harmful in the home, what message do you have to the supporters out there?
That's really important, Alicia, because I think I know that there are lots of amazing folks who are helping newcomers out there, and sometimes they are left with questions around, what is culturally appropriate. Do I understand the culture enough for me to make these assumptions or make these judgments? And that's a difficult call sometimes. But I think, sexual assault certainly, and sexual violence is usually very clear, right? We know that this is what it means, and we can label it. And if you can label it, then that is something that you should come forward with. Perhaps, talk to the person and let them know that you are concerned for them, that you think that this is wrong, and that there are resources available to them. I do think that supporting someone requires that they want to be supported.
Mm-hmm.
So, one way of ensuring that they want to be supported is to have that dialogue with them, is to have that conversation around what is wrong and what should be reported, and the services and resources that are available to them. And then go from there. And we are here to help.
Mm-hmm. And not everyone wants to report as soon as something happens.
Absolutely. There could be, there could be mediation that, could happen to help resolve some issues. It could be some counseling, family counseling even that may be needed. It's really important to note that a lot of newcomers come with their own trauma as well, right? As a family, as a whole. So it's, if it's a family with a mother and father and kids, all of these individuals are most likely have had some sort of trauma in their recent past. And so it's important to also note that and to identify that. And that's not always easy to identify, which is why I say, you know, we have to move with caution. If you think you're seeing something, talk about it with that family. You know, see if it's something that can be resolved. See if it's something that is coming from that place of trauma, that perhaps you can then reach out to a resource to sort that out and not escalate unnecessarily. But at the same time, you know, identifying what is harmful is also important.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Reem, for sitting down and having this very important conversation with us.
Thank you, Alicia.